Hello everyone, Spirit of Thersites here. Recently I reviewed the RNC and DNC, and doing so took a lot out of me because those were really boring conventions, and the speakers almost all kinda sucked. So I decided to watch the convention for a Movement for a People's Party as well. It took me a little while to get around to doing it, because it was a 5-hour broadcast, but I finally completed it just this past weekend, and I decided to give my thoughts. Most people on the left, myself included, recognize that the Democratic Party is at best a deeply flawed vehicle for leftist movements. At worst, it is something which is an absolute obstacle and needs to be eliminated. Whether you want to reform the Democratic Party or eliminate it, in either case, one of the tools you can use is an outside party, and right now there really isn't a viable left-wing alternative to the Democratic Party, although that is a point we'll have to revisit shortly. The headliners of the People's Party convention were Nina Turner and Cornel West, two people who I think were very well chosen. Both of them are dynamic speakers and can really help pump up the energy. Another person who showed up and ended up kind of stealing the show about midway through was Chris Hedges, someone who normally is a pretty boring speaker, but in this case he was quite excellent and he came with a vengeance, even critiquing Bernie Sanders, one of the heroes of the kinds of people who would attend this sort of left-wing People's Party. The speakers were a pretty mixed lot overall. You had activists, politicians, intellectuals, and also YouTube pundits. Many YouTube personalities who I've been following for the last few years, off and on, showed up to participate. It was interesting watching how different personalities tried to adapt themselves to a political convention. Jamarl Thomas and Tim Black, for instance, didn't really change anything from what they do on their normal shows, whereas some people were quite different. Jimmy Dore also did the same thing he always does, so that was interesting. Who was the person who changed up the most? Probably Mike Figueredo. He was clearly kind of nervous, so he very much tried to be very formal and button up with this. So that was something I found kind of interesting as a side note. The positives for the convention as a whole were that there was a good deal of intellectual diversity. Different people brought different concerns. All of them were positive in terms of wanting to accomplish something rather than simply wanting to stop something, although they also acknowledged things they wanted to stop, such as the influence of money in politics. So I feel like that was well balanced. And one thing that I found encouraging is that unlike the sort of stage-managed affairs that are the DNC and RNC, the People's Party seems to be open to having critical discussions. The chat was open throughout this event, and people were critiquing speakers as they talked. They were receptive to a lot of their ideas, but critical on other points. And I think that that kind of feedback and openness to feedback is crucial to trying to form a movement which will at some point be successful. The People's Party wants to start fielding candidates as early as 2022 and to put forward a presidential nominee in 2024. At this point, it's not entirely clear whether the People's Party wants to become a full-blown, viable third party, possibly one which is a threat to displace the Democrats, or rather it is just looking to soak up enough attention to force the Democrats to move left, or to to serve as a nucleus that can then be absorbed by the Democratic Party and try to take it over from within. The exact strategy is not entirely clear, and since the left is divided amongst itself about whether to try to conquer the Democratic Party from within or displace it from without, or some combination thereof, that discussion is one which very much needs to happen in terms of what role the People's Party will play in that process. The vision is not entirely clear, but that is to be expected. This party is in its embryonic state. When I talk about the intellectual diversity on display, almost everyone there was clearly left, but they had their different emphases and particular issues. The one person who sort of stuck out a little bit was Jesse Ventura, who, while he is against money in politics and also is very socially liberal, he self-identified at one point as basically a libertarian and also mentioned the JFK conspiracy theory. So it's kind of interesting that he was there, and I assume the only reason he was there is because he was floated for a little bit as a potential Green Party nominee. And at one point I was into that idea because I thought his name recognition would get the Green Party a good number of votes and build some support behind that movement. But after having heard him speak for just a few minutes to the People's Party, I think Howie Hawkins actually made the right decision to effectively screw over Jesse Ventura. And normally I'm not in favor of rigging a primary, but a Jesse Ventura nomination would have quickly taken away focus from what the Green Party is supposed to stand for, and it would be a personality-driven campaign centered around Jesse Ventura. So that was one takeaway I had from this that was almost unrelated to the convention itself. But to circle back to how important it is that the random rank and file of the People's Party hold their leadership accountable and raise concerns, there was one very salient question which continued to be posed over and over, mostly by what I presume was one or more older voter happened to be in the crowd. The question took two basic forms. One was, why not just vote for the Greens? And the other question, which I think is perhaps the better question, is how is this People's Party going to be different than the Green Party? And the reason I presume that these are older voters is because one of them mentioned having voted for the Green Party for the last 20 years. So to address the first point, why not the Greens? Well, if the Greens were going to accomplish anything, it probably would have happened by now. So I think that the Green Party as a left-wing alternative has clearly failed. They rarely get much over 1%. A lot of the voters they attract are people who just are disaffected. They can't seem to grow their voting base even after the Democrats choose shit candidate after shit candidate. So in 2016, the Democrats had Hillary Clinton, who was deeply unpopular with the left, yet very few people went to Jill Stein. This year, Joe Biden is deeply unpopular with the left, and many Democrats, including most former Bernie people, plan to vote for him rather than Howie Hawkins. So clearly the Green Party doesn't really have much juice behind it. And it has proven to be unviable and not really that interesting. If I had to speculate as to why it hasn't been more successful at attracting more voters, it is that the Green Party is somewhat international, and Americans are very suspicious of things with international connections because many Americans, at least people outside of the left, are fairly nationalistic in their outlook. So that might be one of the problems the Green Party's had. So presumably a People's Party would be free of that baggage. Hopefully. So to circle around to the second question, how was this going to be different than the Green Party? So first of all, this would rely upon how the charter ends up being set up. What is the fundamental core belief and organizational principle of the People's Party? Well, it will be against corporate power and against money in politics, but both of those things are also characteristics of the Green Party. It'll obviously be pro-environment, but as the title of the Green Party gives away, so is it. It will mostly, almost exclusively involve people from the left, but again, that's what the Green Party does. So that second question is actually very difficult to answer. If I had to provide an answer that would justify the People's Party, I would simply say that the Green Party has failed, and you should try it again under a different guise, maybe. I think that's actually, at this point, the best justification for the People's Party. However, it is possible that there will be some further refinements to what the People's Party stands for that will make it clearly different than the Green Party, and also more electorally viable. Let's see, do I have any other real thoughts here? Not really. Just to talk about the Green Party for just another moment. I originally wanted to make a video on all of the various third-party candidates running, and I found them hard to find for a while, and I started to, in my mind, entertain the conspiracy theory that they were being suppressed by the algorithms on various search engines, but when I finally found the truth, it was even more depressing. In a year when you would think that a viable or semi-viable third-party candidate would emerge to save people from the choice between Biden and Trump, it hasn't really happened. Third parties have been completely absent. They've been negligent. Howie Hawkins not only is the Green Party candidate, he is also the candidate for the Socialist Alternative, the Socialist Party. So it's a very bizarre thing. Most people who could potentially run and gain something, most parties which could establish themselves and gain something from the turmoil and dissatisfaction that we are experiencing right now, are staying their hands. So, because there isn't a viable third-party organization in existence already, we're really seeing an opportunity get squandered, an opportunity to upset the apple cart of the bipartisan disaster that is the two-party system in America. And this is really why the People's Party needs to be underway by 2022 and 2024. I imagine that we'll have a really shitty choice in 2024 between the Democrats and Republicans. I'm not very optimistic about this coming decade, as I've expressed on many occasions. If I'm right, Biden will win in 2020, and then before the election, Kamala will take over. That will stave off any possibility of a meaningful challenge in the primary from the left. Kamala gets nominated, the Republicans nominate some other ghoul, and once again, it is a choice between two people who are absolute dog shit. So, there needs to be some way for voters to vote for a person who is better than what is available. Right now, I'm more or less forced to vote for Howie Hawkins, who I do not believe is a very good candidate. He lacks charisma. He is more or less a creature of his own party. He's better than Biden or Trump, but there's not really a lot more I can say about him. I would say, if anything, he's clearly a big step down from Jill Stein, who herself was a big step down from Ralph Nader. But Howie Hawkins is the best candidate we have available in 2020, somehow. With all the opportunities available to produce a functional, decent human being, we as a society, a country with 320 or 30 million souls, can't produce a single goddamn candidate who is worthwhile. And that maybe should be the real answer to the question of why the People's Party is needed. We need actual choices in these elections. We should not be bound to a dichotomy between two forms of evil and then only a smattering of alternatives who are themselves not all that great either. So until next time, I'm Spirit of Thersites. Hoping I didn't rant too much there. It went a little longer than I thought, but not too horribly long. Peace out.